Hello and welcome back to my daily 3D modeling speed challenge, where today's challenge actually comes from a viewer where I am going to be making this campfire. As always, leave a comment if you have a challenge for me, but otherwise my time starts now. So, okay, I'll begin with breaking down the scene I kind of want to make. So a campfire I think has a few basic parts. So one, the ground. Two, there's usually like a rock sort of outline. Three, there's pieces of wood. Four, smaller pieces of burnt kindling. Five, the fire. Six, the smoke. And seven, the particles. So I'm going to go ahead and try to make all seven of those things. And why don't I actually make a little quick checklist for that? One, ground. Two, logs. Earth. Two, rock boundary. Three, logs. Four, burnt kindling. Five, fire. Six, smoke. Seven, little like particles. Okay, so I was also asked to make this in a sort of stylized style, so that's how we're going to be doing this. All right, I'll begin with the ground. So we'll use a plane. We're just going to scale this up, and then I've decided I want this to be a nighttime scene. So I'm gonna just do a general block out really quickly. So I'll add a cube, and I think the fire being around 2 meters, this is actually a good size for it. So we'll have it like that. And then we'll have the, what's it called? The sort of rock outline be around it like that. And so when it comes to framing it in our camera, why don't we put it why don't we put it in maybe the bottom 2/3 of it like that? And then we can have it sort of particles floating up into the night sky. And then I'm also going to do a really quick and dirty images as planes. And I'm going to use the exact same sky I used for the thumbnail of my, of my column video, of my Greek column thumbnail. So we can just move this over, scale it up, move it over, and also move it back. Oops, this is moving a little quick. So we'll just move it back to the background, scale it up like that. We can scale this down now. And then actually, why don't we see how it looks? And then we can decide what scale it needs to be. So I think about something like this could look good. And then I also want to make our ground plane. Why don't we make it so that it sort of is a hill? It'll be a little bit of a slope. So Control E, subdivide, add a couple more. Okay. And then grab this vert, hop into camera view, proportional editing, GZ, make it big, make it bigger, that, and grab these two, GZ, and angle it down like this. And so now it's got a bit of a natural hill shape going on, and we can also just make it shade smooth to make it even more convincing as a ground effect. It might even be worth it to add a subdivision surface modifier on this so that it is just gonna be even smoother. Okay, we don't need any in the viewport, but we'll have 2 in the render. All right, shading. I want to make this, so because it is a hill, I'll add in a material, call this ground. Now it's just going to be a very simple gradient texture. And note, I am doing the stylized, so I'm not really going to do I'm not going to have a lot of use for the principled BSDF. So we'll add in a diffuse BSDF, and this is going to be the classic setup that I've done. Separate color, make it HSV, duplicate that, combine color, combine color. Also make this HSV. We'll have our diffuse, we'll have a, goodness, so we'll have our diffuse, we'll have a combined color, we need a shader to RGB, and that is a good start. We also want a mapping node for this and a mix color, and I'll break down what I'm going to do with all of these nodes here in a second. So for starters, the color is going to be done using a mix color. So we want one of these to be sort of a grayish, a brownish dirt color, and the other one to be a grass color. So we can just plug that in, and we don't want it to be linear. We want it to be a sphere, and we'll make it from the object coordinates because the origin is right in the center, and it looks like we need to invert this. So why don't we add like an invert, put that in there. Okay. And then I'll also add in a color ramp, and we'll get rid of this invert now because what we can do instead is just flip these like that. And now we can sort of just tune in the size of this. Okay, perfect. Now we'll add this color into the diffuse BSDF, because I do want this to be impacted by the lighting. Shader to RGB, we'll do a color ramp, put the separate color in the middle of that, but we want that to be the value. And then we'll do another separate color and a combined color where we take in the original hue and saturation and take in the color ramped value, but we're going to add in some constant stops, make it all the way bright. Now we can add in just a couple more gray stops along the way, and we actually don't even want it to be fully gray. We can just make it a little bit lighter like that. So we can have some, convincing enough color stops. And it might even be worth it to make it like ease. So it's like sort of a harder, you know what? All right. I don't want to spend all my time working on the ground. So we'll just make that a bit darker, maybe a bit more orange, a bit lighter now. You scooch that down a bit. Rendered view, where we want to add in a sun, but this is actually not going to be a sun. This is going to be the moon. So I want to make the color that's the world, although we do want it to be sort of a dark blue world, but we want the light itself to be a bluer, actually, light. With the strength, we'll give it a strength of 3 because that's sort of the standard for all of my NPR models. So that actually might even be a little high, or we might be able to tune these colors down. We'll just push it a bit cooler, push it a bit darker. Same thing with you, push it a bit darker, push it a little cooler, and okay, sure, that's a good enough start for like a nighttime sort of grass. Maybe we can make that a bit darker like that even a bit darker. Make it lighter. Okay, so we spent 8 minutes on the ground. All right, we got to move quick. So for the rocks layout, we can make just a subdivided cube, add in a displacement modifier. Where is it? Form, displace. I really got to learn my hotkeys for these modifiers that I'm using all the time. Like you'll see that I very often am using displacement modifier. I'm very often using, you know, just these, I have sort of a canonical set of modifiers that I use for just everything. So we'll do it like that. And then why don't we make it like just a bit more, you know, visually interesting. And then we can also make it another subdivision after this, and then make the coordinates into global space, so that we take this camera view, move it down, this, scale it down, and we can just duplicate a bunch of these around. Now we've duplicated all these, and we can just rotate them around a bit, and then we can just scale them up around, you know, their local axes to make them just a bit more convincing. We don't want any of them, you know, fully overlapping. Maybe we can get away with it in the back, but it needs to be a little bit imperfect. And luckily, the fact that these are using global space makes the textures a bit more convincing. But other than that, we can hop into shaded mode. There's shading, make it new. And we want it to be very rough. We want it to be dark gray. And why don't we actually make a noise texture where we can do like dark gray like that. And then why don't we just add a color ramp? You know what? No, we're going to copy, duplicate the ground color, call it rock. And then instead of this, we can just delete this whole setup. Or actually, you can delete it like that, add in a noise texture. Or actually, I'm already liking how it has those two colors there. So why don't I just make this into a sort of dark gray color like this? And I don't mind it being a little bit dark blue down there instead of, you know, so actually I do want to add some like lighter hue up there, but I want to make the shadows nice and dark for this. And I might even make these constant. And as always, object, shade, smooth. I might want to add a bit of a highlight to this, question mark, maybe it'll work. Okay, so that adds something of a little bit of a highlight to that, but you know what, whatever, that'll be fine. And then actually for the lighting, I want to add a point light to the middle of everything, and I want to make it orange. So orange needs to be like 1,000, because I don't want to have to bother with making the, what's it called? And I don't want this to have any impact at all from the, what's it called? The lighting. So I'll make it an emission, strength of 1, roughness all the way up, and there we go, much better. So I'll have that sort of be there. Maybe you can move it down. All right, beautiful. Now I'll add in the logs, which the logs are going to be classic setup. Do a cube, GZ, tab, S, everything except the Z, sure. Yeah, logs, 17 units. Okay, we're looking good. We'll add in a subsurf, and I won't sharpen these edges, but I will sharpen, grab these. So I'll sharpen these edges, and I actually like how that has a bit of variation. We can just rotate and flip this guy around to make all of our logs. So we'll add subdivisions, again, deform, or displace rather, new, give me clouds, and let's turn the size up just a bit. Let me turn it down a bit, back to the modifier, global space, strength, and this can be like 0.3, it looks like, maybe 0.2. Yeah, that looks good. And then we'll do generate, or not, we'll do generate, subsurf, where we'll give it 1 subdivision, even in the render, object, shade smooth, and that looks to be like a good log. So we want to move this guy down, and if that's the center, why don't we add a couple of logs, sort of just leaned in, sort of leaning around every which way, 180, that, like this, rotate, 180, go. And are these, yeah, displacing in the global coordinates, global. So, okay, they are changing. So that's good. And why don't we do just these 3 logs, and then hop into side view for a second. That's not the side view. And we'll scale this on the local Z just to make it fit onto the fire a bit more. And there we go. That looks good. So why don't we make these we'll make a material for these where we can duplicate the rocks, and I want to select the rock, and we want to name this actually to wood. So wood. So these are all wood now, but instead of gray and blue, we want them to be like dark brown and you know, even darker brown. And instead of having that weird switch on the bottom, why don't we make it sort of like that all the way around? Or let's check out a reference photo. So they actually need to be much blacker than this. So I'll make it darker, and then I'll add in a very dark. We'll add in a black stop there and make this also black because, or make it just super dark like that. And maybe we can expand how much black I have. Scooch that down, scooch this over, maybe even, no, whatever. This looks fine. I'll make these not cast any shadows, shadow none, because there's going to be a bunch of stuff going on down there. And I'll have also the flames coming up from this, so that'll be fine. So next, we want to have the kindling in the bottom. So for this, we'll add a plane, and I'll merge all the vertices, merge at the center, and then I'll just extrude some stuff out. We can just extrude a bunch of, you know, random lines like this. No method to the madness. We're just, you know, making a bunch of twigs like that. And then for this, we want to add in a skin modifier. On all of these, we can Control A, make them all smaller. And then in edit mode, we can duplicate these, rotate the new guys on the Z a bit like that. Now the camera, okay, perfect. That looks like kindling to me. Shading, we want to give these the wood texture, but duplicated. And instead of this, you know, mixed color at all, we just want to make these pretty much just black. And we can also make the color ramp reflect that fact. So get black, dark gray, maybe a little bit of, you know, shine like that is fine. And then one thing I didn't add is there needs to be coals on the bottom. So I can duplicate this object, tab into edit mode, scale this down on the Z, we'll see everything. So scale it down on the Z, scale it up on everything but the Z, make the vertices bigger, and these are going to be our coals. So we'll go into shading for these, duplicate that, call these coals, and then instead of this color, instead of diffuse at all, actually, we want to add in an emission. So we'll throw in an emission shader, and we can actually scale them down on the Z even more, like that. Make it like a nice white orange, or actually, why don't we do noise, color ramp, mix, okay? Result, throw it there, oh, mix color, result, throw it there, color, put it there, factor, or no, yeah, like this. And we want it to be white, and we want it to be sort of a bright orange with the value all the way up. Bright and neon orange. Why don't we solo this for a second? So I want the strength to be high, like a 5 maybe. So we can make this, which one's orange? So it looks like the white is our orange. So I'm thinking like that, and back to layout mode. Here, give me a rendered view. Okay, this is mildly convincing so far, but it'll come together when we add the fire. So for the fire, 10 minutes, okay. We'll add in a cube, and then for this, I want to manually model in, like basically, so the fire has like this, like it comes to a point basically, like it forms like a triangle shape. So I guess I'll make that by moving it up like this. Tab, you can grab these top vertices and scale them down, but we also want it to be extend it up a bit. And why don't we scale it all up a bit as well while we're at it? Because how high do we want the fire to reach? So the fire should be actually smaller if we want it to stay in the bottom thirds like that. And why don't we make the camera have viewport guides, so we can actually make all of these smaller, or you know what, we can just move these up instead. And then we can have particles coming up from here as well. So for this, modifiers, you know the drill. We'll do like 3 subdivisions. Oops. And we'll want to make these bottom faces really sharp so that it makes sure it reaches down, but the rest of them are fine being as smooth as they are. So then we'll add in a big displacement modifier. So generate, and where's displace? Deform, displace, new, and we'll make it clouds. And then I want to parent the coordinate system to an object. So I'll add in an empty axis and move them over here. Now make U coordinates, object, select object, and we'll give it to this. Now what that allows us to do is move this up and animate this, but otherwise I want to make this, turn the strength up a bit, and I actually want to scale it a bit on the Z like that, so that whenever we move it, it's a bit more convincing. Now what we can do also is we can extrude some of these out. No, Control Z. We can just grab some of these, extrude them up, and just add in some of those little like dancing details that you see on fire. Maybe even one over here, like this, down like that. Okay, and then if we move this, okay, I'm actually quite happy with how it's coming out. So for the material for this is going to be the most crucial part. Unsolo, select this, and we'll give it the, why don't we start with the ground, why don't we start with the wood material, duplicate it, call this fire, and we also want this to be shaded smooth, shade that smooth, and okay, why don't we begin with fixing this color ramp. Color ramp, value, color, and goodness, we'll make it constant. And then I also want this to have shadows none, shadow mode none, perfect. And actually, goodness, this is tough. We don't want this to be a diffuse BSCF. I actually want just yeah, actually, no, we don't want this to be diffuse at all. So what we can do actually is just use a color ramp and the colors of an emission shader. So we'll put that there. Now this, we want it to be strength like 10. And then I actually want noise, emit factor, clamp factor, throw that into the result. And then that's actually not too bad, but we do want some darker parts in the fire, that's for sure. But we also want some some super light parts as well. So maybe we turn the scale or add a color ramp and bring in the white stop, black, make it big like so. And then actually, why don't we make it constant? So instead of having it a black texture, why don't we make it like a darker orange texture like that? And then in theory, there would actually be a color gradient from the bottom to the top. So why don't we actually add that in? Yeah, we can just do a linear gradient. Why don't we take a look at that? Control T from the object coordinates. And where is the object? Okay, we need to rotate this along the Z, perfect, by 90. And then add in another mix color. Can use this as the factor, where we'll just do this, slap that into the color of the emission, that, and then we want it to go from this color at the bottom, to like a white, or to like a redder up top, I guess. How do campfires look? I mean, yeah, it's a bit redder on like the flex. So why don't I actually add in, like, maybe we make gradient texture, that vector. So why don't I add some noise in for like the scale, and then I can add in a map range like so, from 0 to 1 to like 0.9 to 1, and then we can rotate this along the Z. That's not the rotation we want. We can rotate this along the X maybe. No, like that. Rotate it on the Y. No, maybe we want this to be, you know what, whatever, it's fine. We can just translate this around if we even want to do that, but we want it to be like this, strength of like 10. For the camera, we want bloom on, and then last but not least, we want smoke. So I'll add in just some meta balls, GZ, or actually, why don't I add in a particle system on the fire, where I'll add in particle system, emitter, and I'll say physics, Newtonian, velocity, normal, no, object axis aligned. Yeah, we want it to be on the Z at like 1 meter per second. So let's see how that looks. Yeah, so it's bouncing up like that, and we'll make the mass really small, like 0.1. Go ahead, and then I'll add in a wind force. G, yeah, we'll scale it up. And then I want the wind actually to be quite strong. So for this force, physics, strength, like 5, maybe 2. Okay, cool. And then I want to add some noise to the wind, maybe like 2 noise. Okay, perfect. And then the amount of the particles can be much lower, number like 500. Okay, that looks beautiful. And then we'll do render as object, and we'll say instance object a metaball, and then we'll remove object scale or turn the scale up to 1. Okay, so maybe 0.5, 0.2, 0.3. Okay, so we'll start with that. And then for the shader, we'll make a new, call this smoke, where we'll just make it like sort of a transparent kind of thing. So just alpha blend, or blend mode, alpha blend, shadow mode, none. So blend mode like that. Turn the alpha of these up. So that should be the smoke texture. But this is really kind of bugging. Make it longer, a bit thinner. Okay, and actually, I don't want this to emit. And okay, we've been out of time for I don't know how long, but I do want to do justice to this scene. So we'll do backface culling, I guess, or alpha hashed. You know what? We don't need any alphas for this, because what we can just do is crank the roughness up, or even just add an emission, and it'll be a nice like sort of pale white. And then we'll just let it play for a second. And I want to capture like a few frames before this as like our final shot. But other than that, I think that actually might be a good stopping point. So we'll just render image. I think that should be baked by default, but don't quote me on that. This might be wrong. Okay, maybe I have to bake to frame, which not such a big deal. And I'll say particles, cache, calculate to frame. Now we can render again. Let's see how it goes. All right, and with that, I actually think I'm gonna call it good on this 3D modeled stylized campfire render in Blender. Thank you for watching. This has been Patrick. Goodbye.